This episode of the Game Biz is brought to you by Audible. For a free 30-day trial and to receive a free audiobook, just head on over to audible.com/GameBreaker. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Game Biz, episode 9 for September 24th, 2013. I'm Gary Gannon. You're watching GameBreaker TV. Joining me, as always, the Game Biz man of the hour, Mr. Monty Sharma. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great, Gary. How you doing?
Excellent, excellent, excellent. We're back to a normal Q&A week this week with some questions, so let's jump into it. I actually, this first question, I really can't wait to hear your thoughts on this with some big announcements this week. So Mike wants to know, it says Steambox. You seem to be down on hardware and Linux games. Do you still think it will make a difference? What do you think of Steambox, especially the SteamOS just got launched? They got two other things to announce this, coming up really soon. Was one of them today? One of them might have been even today or tomorrow.
Yeah, I didn't see anything today, but I might have missed it.
Might be tomorrow.
Yeah, so where I saw things like WiiU and that not making it, I think Steam's got a shot. Excuse me.
Because of the market penetration, just because they have so much of the market already?
They have the users, so you're already signed up with Steam. You already have a bunch of games with Steam. And since one of the first things they're going to do is let you stream from your PC to your TV set, then people start taking it, so they start to be habituated to playing these Steam games in their living room. The next stage goes to, all right, where's all the content, the native content come from? So Linux games have, as a market, has been terrible. There's no point being in it. Steam did some experimental stuff with it, and I think a lot of it has to do with what's happening on the Mac side of things, where you're getting things that are essentially built for a Unix-based OS. They're easier to port between those two. They've got a lot of the same things going on. And that might be part of the thing that's helping them get content ramped up for it, because, until they show some really decent numbers, nobody's going to make a big effort to port to Steambox.
How do you think that? So SteamOS, so they announced SteamOS this week, which that seems really cool. And seems like sort of the next incarnation of what they were going with the big picture stuff with Steam already, where they were trying to push you to televisions. But I don't know. There's two things here. So one is how many people. I wonder how many people out there were really going to hook their PC up to their television. I never did. I used big picture once in a while when I was gaming, and then I got to wonder with Steambox is, how different and what's going to be the benefit there to actually purchase that thing rather than just purchasing a PC?
Yeah, so I think you should say no married guy ever hooked his PC up to the TV. I'd picture Steambox as being a low-cost add-in that's going to do a whole bunch of things that Apple TV, Chromecast, Roku, blah, 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 blah.
What kind of price point do you think they're going to come in at, though?
I think you're looking definitely sub 500. You might even be looking sub 200.
Wow, really?
199.
Okay, so then that maybe changes things for me then.
Right. So how do they, my whole thing is it's about the numbers. And so if you've got millions and millions of people on Steam and you make it really easy for them to get it onto their TV set, it's a couple $100, even a guy like you would do. Boom, they're now showing that, hey, 10% of all Steam users are using, Steambox. Now a developer says, maybe I try and do something native and I can capture a large part of that 10%. And that's worth doing. So they've got shot. They're taking their time. They're not rushing into anything, and it looks interesting.
Do you think this could almost help? I'm a huge PC gamer. I think you are as well. More even than a console player. And don't get me wrong, I don't want to say PC gaming is dead, but let's be honest, PC gaming is a fraction compared to the console market these days. We're seeing like a resurgence with certain developers, kind of like, like the Star Citizen guys and things like that, really kind of embracing the PC platform. I mean, do you think like a box like this, because like PC gamers have never really thought of like PC gaming in some sort of like, modular like box that you just buy from a company like this? You always just thought, oh, you buy a PC, I mean, you upgrade it, you do all those kinds of things. Do you think this could almost like, I don't know, kickstart the PC market again?
I think we'll have to see what sort of controls they ship with it. So if all they give you is a gamepad, then, a little more problematic. So you've got the map games to it, all that sort of stuff. They might try something like the second screen stuff. So your iPad or your iPhone or Android device, that ends up being your controller again. Cool, but I don't see a lot of people using it. If they can give you the sort of functionality you get from a keyboard and mouse, or the responsiveness, not necessarily with a keyboard and a mouse, then I think you might have, you might have something there. PC gaming is good because you can have a whole rich, complex set of controls, and you can hit them really quickly. That's great. Doesn't work that way on consoles. Consoles are really good for fast, focused stuff.
I think it's going to be really interesting if they put these things on shelves in stores and how they actually communicate that to the average consumer and try and sell it. That's where I think it gets interesting. I think to communicate this to all the people out there watching this show and people who are dialed into Steam already, which there's so many people, maybe that's all that they really need. That makes a lot of sense, where it really gets like, I walked by Best Buy the other day and I actually saw some Ouya's sitting on the shelf, and they looked really sad. They were kind of like half hanging off the shelf. And I just imagine like the average person walking by is just like, what do you don't even know what that is.
But think of it this way, right? Let's say they have it ready for summer 2015. It all comes together. That's going to be their big push. They take the Steam summer sale and they say, hey, if you want, blah, here's this big pack of games, you get the Steam box for free.
Oh, wow.
They've got the ability to mix the software pricing with the hardware pricing to give you discounts. If they want to do something like give you a subscription offer, and I'm not saying I've heard anything suggesting they're going to do this.
Right, but something that
the flexibility,
give you the box for free.
Right.
Pay us, give you, it's almost like, like a cable, like television sort of like scenario. That's a really good point. So you're bullish on the on Steam, huh?
Yeah, I think they've got all the things they need to make it a success. Doesn't guarantee anything, but it's a lot better than some of the stuff we've seen so far.
Sure. I'm excited for it. All right, so next up, Eric says, hey, Monty, my friend and I are working on making a fan game based on a popular IP to get our feet wet in the game industry. What sort of legal ramifications could we encounter when we release the game onto the internet? Oh.
Yeah. This is where you want your bail bondsman ad.
Yeah.
So, all right, it depends on a few factors. One is how successful the game is. So if the game gets traction, then you're going to find the IP holder wanting to do something to you. Because if they don't defend their trademark, they can lose it. So if it's successful, you're going to be in trouble. If you're making any sort of money off of it or charging people for it, they're going to come after you because that's money you're taking out of their pocket. That's your brand, their brand that you're hurting. And if they're a big company, so if you're taking somebody's IP and they're actually one of the large media companies, they actually have services that scan the internet for anything related to any of their IPs and automatically whack them over the head. Now,
I mean, Disney has literally a room full of people. There's it's quite a big team. I mean, I think it's like probably, I'm guessing, but I think it's close to like 50 people who literally sit all day and look for IP infringements on any Disney property. And that's all they do.
They've got web crawlers that fire up all these links, and they check the link and they say, is this valid, not valid? And
again, so, a lot of people out there may take that as like, well, they're so evil. But again, the way the law is written, if you don't protect your trademark, you can lose it. So they have to pursue things like that immediately. That's why it's a lot of these times you see these news stories and they jump all over some kid and they're just like, oh, this kid's just being a cool fan. Why they have to do this? There's really no question they have to do this. But So what do you do in this situation? Like, let's say you're not
Right.
charging money for it, but
Yeah.
it is a large IP. I mean, do you suggest that they just launch something like this, or should they contact
Yeah.
the company and see like what they think of it?
So if you contact the company, you're going to get told straight away, don't do it, because
Mm-hmm.
the only people you can get to in a company like that is the don't do it department. Um, you know,
That is
officially their answer is
every
going to be,
attorney's first
yeah,
response is going to be no, you cannot do that.
no.
But like,
You,
but the
so,
first thing that's
but
coming to mind is the Blizzard thing when the guy is StarCraft universe,
yeah,
the MMO. He took StarCraft, made the MMO. They initially had to put the kibosh on him really quickly, but they immediately
mhm,
brought him down to Blizzard, talked to him, worked something
right,
out, changed the name, and they were really cool with it. They're actually letting him
mhm,
release the product now, which is amazing.
yeah. So it's and that's the good news. So the first thing that you're probably going to see is a cease and desist letter, right? So some lawyer is going to send you this really, formally worded letter that says, "Hey, you're infringing on our IP. Knock it off, or we'll come after you with a big stick." Um, that's great because they're not hitting you with the big stick to start off.
Right.
Um, the next thing, though, is you might then be able to open a dialogue with the company to say, "Hey, look, we're fans. We're learning about the game business, and we just did this sort of as a tribute." At which point in time, if the company is a decent company and they might talk to you and say, "Hey, look, we're thanks for doing that, but the quality isn't something we want associated with that brand, so please take it down." Or, "Hey, you're doing something kind of neat here," and so the Blizzard model of, "Hey, let's help you out," and companies are actually getting much better at being reasonable and decent to people than they used to. So you've got an opportunity that they're not going to whack you, into the ground. But if
I
they
guess
think you're taking advantage of it or you're making money, they will take everything you own.
I guess the other big question I would ask is when you I would say to Eric, right? Yeah, Eric. When you get the game done, is does the game absolutely? If you have a real, let's say the game is super fun. Let's just say if you hit something and you've got a lot of fun, does the game completely like hinge on their IP? Because you might just want to rethink the IP if the game is a lot of
Right.
fun, not get yourself in trouble, and figure out a different way to market it, and package it. It's because
Mm-hmm.
that might be a
That,
possibility.
and the one other hole that you have is the parody exception.
Yes.
So if you are making a satire, a parody of that game, so your art style, the writing, all of that stuff has to be clearly making fun, and you've got a big disclaimer up front, you might actually be able to squeeze that through with a little bit of legal help. But if you're just starting in the industry, odds are you don't have a couple $100,000 to throw at.
So I would think long and hard about the IP thing. If your intentions is actually get their attention to then try and open that dialogue, maybe it's an okay idea. Maybe you
Yeah.
want to consider it and take the risk and go for it. Maybe that's your intention, but you can almost, like you said, you can almost bet they're going to come after you in some capacity at some point if it gets any kind of traction. All right, next up, Laura. Laura says, my daughter is interested in gaming and programming. What is the youngest age you would suggest introducing programming to young folks? There are a number of things out there for elementary school kids. And what programs would you suggest they look at? One recommendation I've received is for her to learn Ruby. Two-parter. What age do you think is a good age?
Yeah, it depends a little on the
In
kid. So
utero?
let's just say an average kid, so not some, math Olympiad kind of kid. An average kid, I'm guessing probably sixth or seventh grade is a good time for them to start doing something serious. Now, that doesn't mean before that they can't do things that are sort of taking them down that path. And then that'll let them ramp up. The thing that I'd always caution parents about is you don't want to jam it in the kid's face in such a way that the kid just hates it and doesn't end up taking that path. So, you've got to pace it with the kid, make sure that, they're having fun. Here's the sequence I would try. Um, you start off with a kid just talking about games and trying to think about what's the logic behind this? Hey, how do you think they did this? And just introducing them to concepts like memory and network and things like that. You go from there, you can try something called Scratch, which is a language developed at MIT that they make freely available on the web. Scratch is a visual, really simple programming language, and every time you learn any language, it starts off with, how do you display stuff on the screen? How do you use variables? How do you use loops? How do you use conditionals? I mean, I've seen it in at least 8, 9 different languages. Every time I look at a book related to it, that's exactly the steps they take you through. So you can learn that in Scratch. So the kid will understand those things. Going from there to GameMaker or Game Salad, so again, they're taking steps along the way instead of getting tossed hardcore into a development environment. Once they're modding things, they're making things in GameMaker that's unique, all of that sort of stuff, then introduce them to something like Unity or UDK. Again, it's a somewhat protected environment where they're able to learn and grow. And then when they're about 90, that's a good time for Ruby. No, it's so Ruby on Rails is really, really hot right now. If you can code in it, you're guaranteed a job. But it is a back-end development environment. It's not, when somebody thinks about building games, they're not thinking about Ruby. If you're thinking about, hey, how do I build my online infrastructure to manage this? Yeah, sure. But if you're dealing with kids, leave Ruby till they get into college. You don't want to teach them Java, you don't want to teach them Ruby. You just want them to understand client, logic, that sort of thing.
All right, next up, this one from Devin. Devin says, I forget the show, but you said it took years to make an MMO ready for a new region. Why is that? Shouldn't it be just language? Thanks for all you guys do. So localization, westernization, easternization, whatever you want to call it. Why does it take so long?
Yeah, there's so much more than just language. I mean, in the regular software world, the enterprise software world, consumer, mostly it's just language. And if you code your software right, it's a fairly straightforward thing to do. When you get into a game, you've got nuances in the language. So it's not just a thing that says file and save. You're actually talking about lore. Well, that lore just doesn't have to be literally translated. You have to create the same sense and feel in that area. So that's a whole different thing. When you get into it, a lot of times the art style has to change. So, color palettes are very different. So if you're in India, white is the color of mourning. Mm-hmm. So if you got to look at those things and say, oh, no, we've got to change this model or that model. The Japanese have, an anime style and a Sailor Moon kind of thing where some of that stuff ends up looking very inappropriate in a Western sense. And all of those sorts of things, they have to be changed. In fact, I was in a meeting once in Japan where these guys were trying to move a bunch of Japanese games to the US, and the person I was with said, look, we can't take this, 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 and this because it just looks like guys hitting on kids, and that's going to end us up in jail. So all of those things you have to really understand. You have to deal with that. The other
on top of that, I got to imagine it for the larger AAA games, especially like MMOs. Most of the time, I'm going to say it slows down the process as well, is because probably all of those changes and that communication pipeline has to flow back and forth between home base, in the East maybe, and also in the West. And like, man, they don't just give you free reign and just say, hey, go take our game and just do what you want to do with it. I'm sure that kind of puts a lot of roadblocks in the way as well.
Exactly. I mean, a Korean company, runs all of their North American servers in Korea. When you want to make changes to stuff, you're talking to the Korean engineers who have Korean stuff. They've got their own home market. They've got other markets calling for attention. that makes it more complex. And then you have to look at play styles. So, in Asia, there's the whole PC bunk thing of you rent a PC, you're in this place with a whole bunch of people smoking and playing with one hand. So you'll find a lot of Asian games are built for just mouse play because they expect that the other hand is engaged with a cigarette. That's a very different thing. I mean, a Western game comes with, implicit two-handedness. All of those sorts of things have to be understood. They have to be changed. And then session length and how people tend to play. Are they going to play for an hour? Are they going to play in 15-minute chunks? Are they going to play in 8-hour chunks? All of that affects how your game's perceived and how you work through it. So there's a lot of work that goes into bringing an IP into another area. It's huge. Not to mention all the legal and accounting stuff, which is a pain in the neck.
Oh, that didn't even think about all of that stuff. And the amount of like dialogue that actually probably goes into the game. It's not like, they're just sticking it through a translator. So that's a lot of dialogue they're going to have to go through. All right, last up today, this one from Merdhin. It says, hello, Mr. Gannon. I'm a huge fan of your network for a long time, and I always watch every show. Now I kind of need your help, or can call it advice. Thanks so much for watching the show, and thanks for being a fan. She says, the thing is my beloved girlfriend is interested in human resource management, and she also loves video games, especially MMOs. We are thinking about this lately, and I wanted to ask you and Monty about the job of the community managers. What are they exactly doing, and what do you need to do in order to become one? Do you need a certification of some kind or a degree? Thanks for the answer, and keep up the good job. Your site is the best in gaming industry. Kind regards, Murden. Thank you so much for good question. I mean, I'll say, first of all, I'll throw something out there. There's no degree in community management that I know of. I'm sure there are a lot of things you could probably take as far as like, psychology and sociology, just to understand people. But just start modding for a site. Find out how to, I think most of the community managers I know have moved their way up through the ranks, but somewhere along the way, they were community managers or moderators on some website somewhere in the world of learning how to deal with people.
Yeah, absolutely. And your girlfriend shouldn't give up thinking about HR. Game companies hire a lot of people. And so, she may want to look at that angle as well. But you're absolutely right, Gary. There's no degree in community management. And the best community managers tend to come out of the player base. And in fact, community managers tend to troll their own forums to look for new hires. And it really comes down to, if you are hardworking, sane, you can write well, you communicate well, that's the kind of person that they're looking for. That, hey, this person can clearly say what they mean. They're in it. They really care about this game. They understand it deeply because, if you can imagine, you started in a community as a community manager for a large, complex MMO. If you don't know it inside and out, you're not going to be able to do that job. You really have to understand it. You have to have a feel for their community because you've got the band hammer. And, if you're used to, I don't know, My Little Pony community, and you end up working for League, you'll ban absolutely everybody who comes near the game. So it's that sort of thing, that get deep, be involved, and then reach out to them.
Gonna have to get experience. So I can tell you, somebody I know recently went for a community position, just to give a little insight of what they were looking for. And they wanted specific screenshots or literally communication that you have had with users where you were solving problems. They wanted to see specifics of hey, this is a problem person here that needs to be dealt with. How did you deal with them? And they want to really see that. So the only way you're ever going to answer that is if you actually have experience and you're in the trenches, kind of doing that day to day. So there's plenty of websites out there always looking for moderators. And some people start out at things like, hey, we're always looking for moderators for our Twitch chat. A lot of our people start over at the Twitch chat where they moderate Twitch. Then they move over to the forums. We've had multiple people like you know, go on from GameBreaker to other companies like Blizzard and everybody else. I mean, CCP, Blizzard, they've hired a bunch of GameBreaker people already. So that's kind of where you got to start, and you just got to get your feet wet and just don't be afraid. But it is a commitment because you got to do it day in and day out.
Yeah, you got to work at it. It's not a simple thing,
and you got to like it because welcome to the internet. It's a scary, dark place. It really is. All right, Monty Sharma, follow him on Twitter at Monster, MONSTER27. And if you have a question for the Game Biz...
You spelled it wrong, Gary.
I did. I totally spelled it wrong. I'm going to take that down because I spelled it wrong. I made new lower thirds. Shame on me. Yeah. That's what I do when I'm working too fast.
Why you got to go change things, you know?
I know.
Fine.
I know. It's MONTSTER27, Monster 27 on Twitter. If you have a question for Monty, you can email him at monty@gamebreaker.tv. That's his email address. Send us your questions. We also look for them on Facebook and Twitter and all that good stuff as well, so send them there. If you want to follow me, you can follow me at Gary Gannon and follow GameBreaker TV at GameBreaker TV. Monty, always a pleasure, sir. Always insightful. Yeah. Have a great week, and we'll see you next week for some more Game Biz.
Enjoy.